The holidays are right around the corner, and one of my favorite things to gift every year are some of my cards. And I have been looking forever for a die like this that creates an A2 size card base, and finally, I have found it. So let me show you how to create this cool set of cards, this little box to go with it, and I want to tell you why I'm so impressed with this. Most of the time when I go to buy these card boxes, they're sold out, so I'm really excited for the possibility of making my own. And not only that, in today's video, I'm gonna go into a whole bunch of tips and tricks so that if you're not interested in creating a box like this, you'll understand how I keep things really simple when I create a set of cards so that I get started crafting. I don't just sit at my desk and then get overwhelmed by choices. I have analysis paralysis, all of those things. How do I get going? Because I created 4 of these cards and this box in 31 minutes is what my time says on my filming process. And I wanted to show you how I did that. So let's take a look. So first of all, I have to give a shout out to this die. It's the first time I've ever used Scrap Diva designs, so I'm always excited to discover a new company, but I love this die because they did not cheap out on it. So each side contains a die. Front, back, side, and it contains the die for the layer. So what's good about this is that when you create the box, like me, I'm gonna cut it out in white and my layers are gonna be blue. That when you glue all this together, because you're using 2 pieces of cardstock, it gets to be really thick and strong. In fact, it comes with everything you need. Little embellishments, a little envelope, a star, a heart, all of the pieces obviously to make the box. So it's a really versatile and well-rounded die. So very much worth it in my opinion for my collection because I create these things all the time. All right. So I'm going to start putting this together and then we'll talk about some tips and tricks on how to really make this process easy. So one thing you're going to notice, I cut everything out of 1 neutral color and 1 color. I didn't go overwhelming trying to pick a color palette here. I literally picked 1 color, light blue, and I picked a neutral, white, to go with this because that way I don't have a whole bunch of decisions to make as far as colors go. And if you're creating a little note card set where all the cards kind of look the same, or not the same, but rather look coordinated, then this is an easy way to do that. Okay, so next up I am grabbing my embossing folder. I wanted to decorate the front a little bit here, so I decided to grab an embossing folder and emboss the layer. And I'm using a 3D embossing folder here. I just think that it's a really lovely way to add detail to your cardstock without using anything super expensive. One of my tips when it comes to choosing an embossing folder to keep things easy and simple is don't grab your whole box of embossing folders of like 100 of them. Grab a handful, like 5 or 6 of them, and let yourself choose from there. Especially if you have them divided already into categories. I knew I wanted a floral, so I grabbed like 5 of them, looked through them quick, and made a quick decision so that I wasn't sitting there forever deciding what could potentially be the perfect embossing folder for this. So as you can see, I'm just layering the blue pieces on top of the white pieces. So for every large die, there's a slightly smaller version of it, or you'll see that there's a strip that goes with it. It's all laid out on the die sheet, and this way you can add your layers. Now, unfortunately, my camera stopped filming, but literally all I did was just glue down the 4 little panels to the front of the box, and now you can see that it's all ready to go, and all I need to do is glue on the back. The only thing you don't want to do, obviously, is that flap where you can see there's a notch there. Just put your finger in to open up the box. You don't want to glue anything on that because that's obviously the part where you're going to open it. You'll see that I added Scotch tape as well. I used liquid adhesive. I'm not 100% sure why I didn't use double-sided adhesive for this or double-sided tape, but I did use liquid adhesive, and therefore I decided to tape down the edges just in case, give it a little extra strength because you're not going to see the inside of the box anyway. Next up, I'm just going to take all these flappy things. I'm sure there's a technical word for it. I don't know what it is. So I'm going to take all the little flappies and I'm going to glue them down, like I said, leaving the top part where it opens free. So there we go. Attach the back. It's all said and done. And how many cards does this hold? I'd say unembellished cards with maybe 1 or 2 layers. I'm going to say it's going to hold at least 8. And if it has embellishments and layers, like I have 3D drops on my cards that I create, there was room for another card or 2 with 4 of these designs. All right, so next up, I'm going to take a Slimline die. You don't need a Slimline die for this, but I have been trying to use these lately because I have quite a few Slimline dies and I feel like they were super popular for quite a while, but then all of a sudden the inspiration stopped. And so I thought I would give you another way that you could use your Slimline dies without making a Slimline card because they're more useful than you think. All right, so I've popped all these out, and actually all these little stars I'm going to save because we're going to create a shaker card and we're going to use these stars for the confetti. How cool is that? No waste here. And as always, my little helper here is always willing to lend a helping hand. All right, so while I'm gluing these together, I'm going to talk a little bit about making those easy choices so that you're creating and not just sitting there overwhelmed by all the options in your craft room. So first of all, as I said, I use one color palette. So I can use a color palette that has 2 or 3 colors in it. Of course I can, but I'm going to stick to that on all of these cards. And this is how in craft sessions, when I sit down, I rarely make just one card. I make a few cards based on the supplies that I have out in front of me, instead of always grabbing and reaching for more and more. The only time I tend to grab and reach for more and more is kind of in the finishing up process where I think, okay, what does this card still need in order to look finished? Okay, so I was creating a bunch of the backgrounds. We'll go through the details on those in just a second, but one of the things, for example, that you can do to get a little bit more out of your embossing folders, obviously, is to emboss and deboss. So I took 2 of my card panels here and I decided to emboss one of them and deboss the other. Now, I don't always have a plan when I'm going into things, but I definitely have a plan as to which techniques I'm going to use. So obviously I had die cuts planned and an embossing folder. I'm not going to really do anything more than that. I don't need to get fancy on everything here. I don't need to do every technique there is in the book on every single card. I don't need to use every supply that I ever owned. Sometimes going for less actually helps you create a little bit more. And sometimes as you're creating, like when I got all the little stars, it will inspire you to maybe create something different. So because I had all these leftover stars, I thought automatically, I'm going to create a shaker card so I can use all these little stars up. So you saw me die cut a frame. You can always make frames out of any nesting dies that you have in your stash by placing 2 side by side, evenly spaced, and running them through your die cutting machine. There's no need to buy extra frame dies or anything like that. I'm going to place a frame on top of some acetate here to create a window for my shaker card. Next up, I'm just going to trim the acetate around the frame here so that nothing is hanging off the edges. And I added foam tape all around the edges, making sure there were no gaps and none of the foam tape was visible from outside of the frame. Wasn't the easiest thing to do with this frame. A rectangle would have been easier, but I think a notched rectangle just adds a little bit of a nicer, fancier, elegant touch. Now I have no idea why I cut the rectangle out of my card base as well. That was a little bit of a mistake. So I just added it here. It is going to give me an extra layer of thickness to my shaker card. It's really not a big deal. Once I place this on my card base, it's going to be fine. So I'm going to go ahead and add anything that I want to that. I always like to add something that gives it a little bit of a shake though, like beads or, really thick sequins so that it does create a little bit of a noise when you shake it, because just the star confetti, as nice as it is, doesn't have that sort of auditory response, I guess you could say. And I don't cheap out on my shaker bits. I like to fill it up. I often find that more is better. Less is not more when it comes to shaker cards. And then I'm just going to place my card base over the top. I'm going corner to corner here, so lining up the bottom left, then the top left, and then going over to the right and pushing down on the right side. And I'm going to hold my hands here for about 30 seconds to make sure everything fuses nicely. Now I have this really cool shaker card. And we're going to take a look at some of those other backgrounds that we created today. So here I have the shaker card. You can see I use my Slimline die and just cut it down and use the pieces here, one coming off the left, one coming down, and I have my debossed embossing over on the right side. So I cut myself a die cut of Happy Birthday to You. I cut it in white and I cut it in blue, just so I had both options out. Sometimes I prefer to just do a whole bunch of die cutting, and I will cut some extras just in case I change my mind. I feel like I want to switch the color. Maybe I want to layer the blue on the white or the white on the blue to give it a shadow, just so I have it all done and I don't have to run back to my die cutting machine and recut something. To me, I just get lazy when that happens, so I'd rather just die cut everything at once, cut out a whole bunch of things, and then see what I'm going to use. Any leftovers I can tuck back into the stamp pocket. It's really not a big deal. I also had a word die called Party Words. It has words like happy birthday, hooray, party, celebrate, make a wish, and I like the fact that there's shadow dies. So all my word dies these days, when I invest in them, I try to invest in ones with a shadow behind them. It just really helps, I find. Pop the die. It gives you so many more options. So let's finish up these beauties. We're gonna add happy birthday here to the shaker. This sentiment's nice and small. It's not gonna take away, I think, from all the details. And it's really a beautiful card, I think, at the end of the day. I might embellish these at the end with some sequins or something, but right now I'm loving the way that this one looks. So that's one card down. The next one was a little bit tricky. I'm not sure if this is the most favorite card I've ever made. It's very simple. It's literally made of 2 die cuts, but half of the Slimline die, or a third of it, more or less, or maybe even a quarter actually at this point, and then this happy birthday to you word die. I haven't used this die before. It's a die that goes straight to from the top to the bottom. I'm not 100% sure if I love it or I don't. I don't know. What do you think? Do you like that die? Overall, I think it's great to have in the collection. I love the stacking of the letters. That's really unique, but I'm not sure if I like the fact that it goes from top to bottom. It's neat, but I found it a little bit challenging to create a nice layout with it, if that makes sense. Next up, I'm going to cut Hello Crafty Friend. This is another really great word die that I'm going to use here, and it's perfect to use a large focal point die on something that has such a busy background like these stars. First of all, it'll tone down the stars, and not only that, there's not a whole lot of other ways you can complete this card without going completely overboard on what it looks like and having tons of layers. I decided to, why not use that extra die cut that I have here and add the happy birthday to this card as well. And now we have all 4 cards down and ready to go. See how quick all of that came together with just a couple of die cuts. And the most complicated thing I really did in there was a shaker. It wasn't necessarily the plan to do a shaker. It just turned out that way because I had all those confetti pieces. Now we can't forget about the box. You can see that by creating a set, I've tied elements in throughout the entire process. So you can see that embossing folder pops up in 2 of the cards plus the front of the box. This word die here is in the same style as the happy birthday word die. You have that large happy birthday word die on 2 of the cards. We have the same color palette going on throughout the cards. So you can see they really are beautiful. They come together nicely as a little set. Lastly, I'm just going to add a couple of little clear gems. And my tip for adding clear gems is to not think about it. Create a triangle, like I did there, and then I usually add an odd amount of embellishments to my cards. So either 3, 5, 7, 9, depending on how many I'm going to add. So that's why I added 2 up there in the corner. I usually lay down my glue and then I put down all of my sequins. So let's take a look at all 4 of these cards. They turned out absolutely lovely, and I think they're going to be beautiful inside the box. We can see what they look like, how much room we still have in the box, and see how they all coordinate with each other. So it opens up super easily. If you're concerned about it staying closed, you could have that outside flap that's showing on screen right now. You could use a Velcro to secure it to the outside of the box, but I like the fact that the flap goes inside the box, and in all honesty, it stayed closed without any issues. That might be cardstock dependent though, so if you're using maybe a cheaper cardstock or something, it might not be as stable as the one that I'm using. I'm just using a Concord 9th cardstock and 110-pound Nina Solar white cardstock for the actual base of it. But you can see how nicely it closes up, and it really is quite lovely. We have quite a bit of room in the box still for other cards if we want to create more in the set. And here's a final look at it. I hope you enjoyed today's card tutorial. I wonder if you'll create some gift sets yourself for the holidays. They really are a great way and an inexpensive way to give things that you've made that might just be kind of sitting around, and everybody appreciates and needs a card now and again. Everyone tells me they love it, the fact that when they need a card last minute, they just go to their collection of what I've created for them and they're always there. Thanks so much for watching.